Stephanie White, they have not forgotten. Stephanie White in what I can only describe as what feels like a hostage video feels like she's forced to compliment, and she does, Caitlin Clark. I don't know if this is a turning of the page to realize you've got to let your playmaker be a playmaker. There is a specific category of institutional behavior in professional sports that analysts and organizational psychologists call reactive capitulation. The moment when a leadership structure that has spent weeks making aggressive, confidence-projecting decisions suddenly and visibly reverses course, not because its internal analysis has changed, but because the external pressure has reached a threshold that makes continued defiance operationally untenable. It does not look like genuine recalibration. It looks like what it is, an organization absorbing the consequences of its own decisions and adjusting its public posture accordingly, while hoping the audience does not notice. Music, the sequence that produced the adjustment. The Indiana Fever fanbase, which has now been documenting this organizational situation with the collective analytical rigor of a distributed research team, noticed immediately. Welcome back. This is. And today, we are conducting a complete, multi-layered breakdown of the most consequential 72 hours this franchise has produced all season. Music. We are examining Stephanie White's post-Valkyries press conference through the specific analytical lens, music, that the preceding weeks of documented organizational behavior make necessary. We are establishing the precise factual record of the league's disciplinary response to the injury reporting violation and what that response communicates about the WNBA's enforcement posture going forward. We are giving Caitlin Clark's MVP campaign the rigorous statistical treatment it deserves, including an honest film room grounded examination of the turnover numbers that will define the ballot conversation. And we are contextualizing the insane quote, its origin, its actual intent, and why its timing produced the viral reaction it did. The documentation is what it is. Let us build the analysis on top of it. Music, I thought she was great, she's an emotional player, and it's one of the things that makes her great. And I thought that she channeled it in a way that needed to be channeled for us to be successful, and she handled it well, and from a physicality standpoint, I love. Following the 90-82 victory over the Golden State Valkyries, a game in which Clark delivered 22 points, including deep-range shot making that extended well beyond the established three-point line against an undefeated opponent with genuine defensive sophistications, Stephanie White stepped to the podium and offered an extended substantive public acknowledgement of Clark's performance and competitive character. She addressed Clark's defensive engagement, her finishing ability at the rim under contact, and her overall competitive disposition. The content of the praise was accurate. The delivery was composed and specific. The fan base's response was immediate, unified, and analytically grounded in something that statistical models do not capture, but institutional memory does. Context. 6 weeks ago, following a game in which Clark scored 17 points in the fourth quarter alone, personally erased a 9-point deficit against the Washington Mystics to force overtime, music, and delivered what was, by any objective measure, the most consequential individual quarter any Fever player had produced to that point in the season. White's post-game press conference offered a generic characterization of team resilience. Clark was not named. The performance was not specifically acknowledged. The national media, Fox News, The Big Lead, and multiple additional outlets with significant reach documented the omission explicitly. The fan response at the time was direct and sustained. The audience that watched White's Valkyries press conference had complete recall of that Mystics press conference. The comparison did not require editorial framing. It was self-executing. When a head coach who declined to name her superstar after a franchise-defining individual performance subsequently delivers structured, music-specific, on-camera praise of that same player in a week defined by league disciplinary action and sustained public accountability pressure, the audience is entitled to ask, what changed? Music, and the answer is not confined to basketball evaluation. Nice about Caitlin Clark, so I could say it. Felt low-scripted. I'm going to be real. A lot of people noticed this and called out Stephanie White. I bet that rolled off the tongue like drinking pure vinegar. Yeah, please. Thank you, Stephanie. The social media documentation of the fan response is worth examining not as commentary, but as real-time organizational intelligence. The side-by-side press conference. Comparisons that circulated within hours of the Valkyries' post-game session were not produced by professional media operations. They were produced by individual fans with access to archived footage and basic music video editing tools operating with the specific motivation of people who had watched this situation develop across weeks and felt the institutional obligation to establish the factual record. One widely circulated post, music, read, "ChatGPT, can you please print something out nice about Caitlin Clark so I could say it?" Another, "I bet that rolled off the tongue like drinking pure vinegar." A third, more concisely, "Music, she got the memo." Huh? The uniformity of the interpretive framework across that response, the shared unprompted reading of the praise as externally compelled rather than internally generated, reflects something more significant than fan sentiment. It reflects an organization that has exhausted its credibility reserve with the specific audience it most needs to retain. Credibility reserves in professional sports are rebuilt slowly through sustained behavioral consistency, not through a single press conference regardless of its content. The question of what specifically drove the behavioral shift is no longer speculative. You take a step forward. Like Lyndon says, you either get better or you get worse. You never stay the same, right? So we got to take advantage every day. And tonight, we got better. I'm really proud of you guys. That's really good stuff. Okay. The WNBA League office has publicly confirmed the issuance of a formal warning to the Indiana Fever organization regarding the handling of Clark's injury reporting prior to the Portland game. The factual basis for that warning is the documented sequence we have established across multiple prior analyses. Clark did not appear on the mandatory 5 p.m. pregame injury designation. She was scratched approximately 1 hour before tip-off after fans had completed their financial commitments to attending, and the organization's subsequent public explanations produced two irreconcilable characterizations of the same event within the same news cycle. A formal league warning is not a financial penalty, but it is a documented institutional action that sits in the organizational record. It establishes that the league office reviewed the situation, found the reporting conduct to be non-compliant with the CBA's requirements, and determined that a formal institutional response was warranted. It also establishes the evidentiary baseline for any subsequent compliance failure. The next reporting irregularity does not get evaluated as an isolated incident. It gets evaluated against a documented prior warning. White's response to the warning, as characterized by multiple reporters present for her media availability, was defiant rather than conciliatory. She maintained that the franchise had made the decisions it considered appropriate. That posture, following a formal league warning, extends the documented record of the organization's relationship with CBA Compliance Authority rather than closing it. In the same week, the league issued a separate fine against White for comments directed at the officiating, specifically public statements characterizing the physical treatment Clark was receiving on the court as insufficiently addressed by referees. The fine represents the league's standard enforcement mechanism for prohibited officiating criticism, applied uniformly across franchises and personnel. Two formal league disciplinary actions against the same organization in the same 7-day period is an objectively documented organizational fact, regardless of the independent merits of either underlying situation. Automatically buying it. Wow, no deflecting. She got the memo, huh? A lot of people believe this is by way of pressure from Caitlin Clark fans, you fans, letting your voice be heard. In a media availability during this period, Clark was asked about White's defensive expectations for her this season. Clark laughed, genuinely. Music, not performatively, and described the standard as insane. The word was deployed with the specific effect that competitive athletes use when characterizing demanding standards that they respect. Anyone watching the footage without an interpretive agenda, the word's viral trajectory had nothing to do with its original intent and everything to do with its timing. Dropping a description of your head coach as insane during a week, music, in which that head coach received a formal league warning, a league fine, sustained national media scrutiny, and a widely circulated reading of her post-game press conference as organizational damage control, that timing produces a resonance that operates entirely independently of what the speaker meant. The internet understood this. The engagement metrics reflected it. Clark almost certainly understood that the timing music would produce that resonance, which makes the choice to use the word in that moment its own form of precise communication. Now to the basketball, because the analytical substance of what Clark is producing deserves the same rigorous treatment we are applying music to the institutional situation surrounding it. 4 rebounds, 1 block shot. Can the Indiana Fever, since they're obviously trying to listen, I guess. I mean, if they don't, they're screwed. I mean, from a business economic 101 standpoint, if they don't start listening to Caitlin Clark fans, through 6 games, Clark is averaging 24. 3 points, 9. 0 assists and 5. 0 rebounds per game. She is shooting 44% from three-point range over her last 4 contests. She is the primary offensive engine of a team that has won 4 of 6 games, including victories over 3 Western Conference opponents. The MVP conversation is not manufactured. It is analytically supported by production metrics that would generate ballot discussion for any player in the league. The turnover number is the statistical reality that the MVP conversation cannot avoid, and it should not be avoided. 6 turnovers per game, 36 total in 6 games, represents the highest turnover rate among any player currently positioned in the MVP discussion. That number will be the central argument made against Clark's candidacy when ballots are cast, and it deserves an honest analytical response rather than a dismissive one. The honest analytical response begins with usage context. Ain't chaps. Already. Why does Steph Y think she's a genius? F7Y. People still ain't there. A lot of people still aren't having this. Why aren't you calling her what she is? This is the MVP. Are you going to push for the MVP, or do you guys not want to admit who this team runs through? Clark's turnover rate is a direct mathematical function of her usage rate and the absence of secondary creation infrastructure around her. When a point guard is the origin point for the offense on effectively every half-court possession, navigate of careless ball handling or poor decision-making judgment at the individual possession level, they are concentrated in specific situational categories, high-pressure creation situations where she is the only available option, transition sequences where the supporting cast's positioning does not match her tempo reads, and late shot clock improvisations where a functional secondary creator would have already received the ball. Those are system-generated turnovers, and reduce the frequency with which Clark must initiate from scratch has not been consistently visible in the game footage. Its presence would be the most direct available mechanism for reducing the turnover number. Its absence is the most direct available explanation for why the number remains elevated despite Clark's evident effort to manage it. The turnovers will drop when the system around Clark reduces her solo creation burden. The system around Clark will reduce her solo creation burden when the coaching staff implements the secondary creation infrastructure it has publicly described. That implementation is the variable the franchise controls. The turnover number is the outcome it produces. Framing Clark's turnovers as an individual performance problem rather than a systemic design problem is not analytically supported by the film. The competitive and institutional situation the Indiana Fever now occupy has a specific shape. Clark is healthy, producing at a level that generates legitimate MVP consideration and leading a team with a positive record through a genuinely difficult early schedule. The league has formally documented the organization's reporting compliance failure. White is managing 2 simultaneous league disciplinary actions while navigating a public trust deficit with a fan base that is now applying continuous analytical scrutiny to every organizational communication. The roster compliance question produced by Walker Kimbrough's release has been resolved by whatever signing decision the franchise has executed or is executing. Each of those variables has a documented status. The competitive trajectory and the institutional trajectory are currently moving in opposite directions, which is precisely the kind of organizational tension that makes what happens next analytically consequential. This is subscribe now and activate notifications for the complete, rigorously sourced coverage of the MVP race development, the league's ongoing enforcement posture toward the Fever, and every organizational decision this franchise makes as the season progresses. Leave your assessment in the comments. Does the film room evidence support the argument that Clark's turnover rate is a systemic product of her usage context rather than an individual performance deficiency? And does Stephanie White's post-Valkyrie's press conference represent genuine organizational recalibration or documented reactive capitulation. Every analytically grounded perspective in that comment section advances the conversation. We will see you in the next video.